Hello, you're listening to episode 18 of 8 Minute Movies, Knives 8, a podcast talking about the 2022 movie Glass Onion.
What?
Yeah,
No,
what?
you know what's going on by now.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
We've done this bit.
Yeah, we did. It was funny last time and funny now, I assume. I hope.
Yeah, like our whole kind of podcast, it's really diminishing returns.
And him, Peter.
Oh yes, I am here too. Hello.
I didn't say my own name. I just pretended like I was ending the thing because it was funny. Ding.
All right. Shall we carry on then?
Yes. How are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm doing okay. Do you want me to talk to you about a recent piece of media that I've been consuming in some way?
I don't think you should you should read the script aloud, but sure. Yeah. I think you should at least pretend it's spontaneous.
All right then. I'll try. I've been
Peter looks at camera and laughs.
You've sometimes got me to laugh better. Like,
well, you should laugh right the first time. Jesus. Right. I've got a library of noises for you that I just substitute in when your noises were insufficient.
I'll just run the tape back, and if you could just react with a bit more enthusiasm to that thing I said, please.
Look, if you were better the first time, I wouldn't have to ADR you. Carry on.
Well,
we're not even 2 minutes in. We've broken up.
I've been playing a video game, one of those video games that they have now. It's called Marvel Snap.
Oh, Marvel Snap. That's
it's not like Pokemon Snap, if that's what you're thinking. You don't go around and take pictures of various characters from the Marvel universe.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
No, I mean, I'd probably look at that.
Yeah, that'd be quite good.
But that's not what this game is about. It's primarily a mobile game, actually, but there is a PC client, but it's basically, at the moment, they're working on a widescreen mode, but at the moment it's basically just the mobile client, but with some borders. And it's a card game. And
like traditional Snap.
It doesn't work like traditional Snap. No,
why did they call it that?
You're not putting. You might think that you're just putting cards down, and then when someone puts down the same, I don't know, Marvel character or something, you say snap, and then you win them or something like that. But you don't. It's not that sort of card game.
I was having trouble then because trying to remember how you played Snap, because I don't think I've played it since I was like 5.
You forgot the rules to perhaps the easiest game.
I didn't forget them. It's just I filed them away somewhere along with other things I haven't needed since I was, a child.
Well, luckily you don't need to remember the rules of Snap to play Marvel Snap. You just need to remember a bunch of other rules. It's a card game in a genre of card game that I have had a bit of a mixed relationship with in the past, I think. So it's the kind of game where you are building different decks out of the cards that you own.
Oh, a deck building game.
Yes, but not... I'm not saying a deck building game, because that is also a different genre of card game in which you build. That's the sort of game where you build up the deck as you're playing the game, and then you're hoping to build a sufficient deck to help you win the game as you're kind of playing the game. No, this is the kind of game where you build the decks in advance of playing the game, and then you play with the decks against other people who have also built other decks.
Oh, like that game that you own a copy of.
I guess the really big one is Magic the Gathering.
I'm thinking of Android Netrunner.
Yeah, that as well, kind of. Although those decks are more kind of pre-made, that you don't have so much leeway of which card you put in there. I seem to recall from that, where it's a bit more like something like Magic the Gathering, where you own the cards that you own and you make the best decks that you can out of the cards that you own, hoping that the cards that you put together kind of have these synergies with each other and have effects that kind of play off each other. But the reason that Marvel Snap works so well for me is that it really kind of trims out a lot of the stuff that makes me not want to play those sort of games. And so one of those things is that the decks can be just quite large, so it can just be a bit of a headache doing the deck building part of it, kind of trying to come up with enough cards to go in the deck and thinking about the right balance of cards to go in the deck, and just there's so many different ways it can go, and it's all a bit exhausting before you even get to the act of playing the game. With Marvel Snap, you are always building decks of 12 cards, just 12 cards. And that makes building a deck really kind of quick and easy. And the other thing about it, I guess, is that it's a kind of a free-to-play model. There are things that you can buy, some of them that are horrendously overpriced, but it's not like a pay-to-win thing. Basically, basically a lot of the things that you'd pay for are just kind of advancing the cosmetics of your cards and things like that. And maybe getting some cards in advance before they're kind of released into the general pool of cards, but never paying like you never feel like you're in a position of, if I don't spend money, I can't win games.
Right.
So it's fairly well balanced for that, but I will say that some of the stuff that it asks you to pay for is pretty overpriced, in my opinion. But so the actual game itself, another thing that's appealing about it is that a lot of these games also just take ages. You see people playing like Magic the Gathering or something like that, and they're just on the same game for ages and ages and ages, and so you kind of go into the game with a bit of trepidation as well, because you're going to be there for a while. And with Marvel Snap, the games take place over 6 rounds, sometimes 7 if certain rules happen and things like that, but mostly 6 rounds, where you each spend a certain number of points in playing cards. And they're over in less than 5 minutes, most games. And there's a timer as well, so you can't spend too long thinking about it when you're playing someone as well. So it's kind of got this combination of being really easy to get into building decks and just really quick, so you never feel like you're committing too much time to it. But also, and the thing that I think is really clever about it is, even though it feels so limited in that way, the decks are so small and the game takes place over so few rounds, the number of different ways in which games can play out, the number of different things that can happen is really, really varied. So you end up wanting to play quite a few times because lots and lots of different things can happen. So one of the things is that you play the game, you play your cards in one of 3 random locations which happen each game, and your aim is to win a majority of the locations, basically get most points on at least 2 out of 3 of the locations. And the locations themselves can either really affect what happens to cards when you play them in that location, or what happens at a certain turn number during the game, or they can sometimes just affect the whole game as well, just have a massive game-changing effect as well, like all the cards cost 1 less, or even something like whatever's in your deck gets replaced by random cards, or just really, really kind of bizarre stuff. So you have this combination of really different cards that have all sorts of effects that play off each other. Lots of different kinds of decks that you can build out of those cards that play out in different ways, and then locations which further mess with that. And it creates this kind of really short but really varied game that is quite fun to play. And so I've been playing a lot of that and spending a little bit of money on it as well. The thing that I am willing to spend money on this game is the battle pass kind of thing, where you spend a little bit of money in order to get some a card and for a kind of limited time exclusivity, and then some bonuses across the month.
I don't understand sort of battle pass style things. I'm thinking of Halo Infinite, where I bought the season battle pass thing, and just thinking it unlocked a bunch of extra things without realizing that it unlocked them if I then played the game for like 800 hours. I'm like, okay, which I never got around to. So,
well, my favorite model of battle passes is not one that Snap does actually, but I think it's good when they do the thing where if you play the game enough, you unlock enough of the whatever the game's currency is to buy the next battle pass. So you only actually have to play, as long as you're playing the game, you only have to buy the battle pass once, and then you can keep on playing and then buy the next battle pass off the back of that. So things like Fortnite do that. And this one doesn't do that. You get certain bonuses, but you can't use those to buy the battle pass. So it's about like £8 or something a month if you want to buy into it. If you don't, you still get some of the bonuses. You just don't get all of them, and you don't get the kind of card of the month that is that'll get released into the general pool of cards further down the road, basically. So you have to wait a bit if you really want that card. So that's all the battle passes, really. I've decided that it's worth my time to get the battle pass as long as I'm playing every day, which I am doing at the moment. I'm playing the game a fair amount daily at the moment, and still getting quite a lot out of it, really.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you were saying earlier about it just being so varied. I'm wondering how that plays out from like a balance point of view. I mean, because if you've got so many different combinations of things.
Yeah. I guess the way that it works is that you do have loads of different combination of things, but most cards fall into kind of different categories. So there are cards that either move other cards to the different lanes or benefit from being moved, let's say. So you can build a deck around cards moving around. There's a destroy one, so cards that either destroy other cards that belong to you or other players, or cards that benefit from being destroyed, or say there's one like death in the game gets cheaper the more cards are destroyed during the game. So the idea of that card is that you can play it without spending any of your resources near the end of the game if you've destroyed enough cards during the course of the game. And then there are I'm one of the early decks that I made that was just out off the back of an idea I had, is that there are lots of cards which just kind of fuck with the other player. Like they'll make one of their cards more expensive, or they'll just draw one of the cards from their deck and you get to use it themselves instead of them, or they'll there'll be a negative amount of energy and they fly over to the other to the other team when you play them, so it takes up one of their slots and also costs them points and just various things like that. So I made a kind of deck, a disruption deck, which just basically did everything that was really annoying to the other player. And there's other things like discard. So separate from destroying cards, there's just discarding cards where they're just kind of removed from the game, and there are decks that benefit off of that. So you can sort of group together cards in these different categories, and then come up with. So there's a lot of different things that can happen, but there are kind of recognizable strategies. And I guess that's how it works. But I will say that often the locations that come up really throw a spanner in the works. So there are some locations which work really well. Let's say if you're playing a move deck, there's one location which gives a card plus 2 points if it moves to that location, which is really great if you've got a move deck because you're going to be moving cards all the time, but is practically useless if you're not using a move deck because because you're never going to move a card. But then again, there's one which destroys a card if it moves to that location. So that one's really bad if you've got a move deck because it's going to destroy your cards when you move it to that. And so it kind of balances out that the locations that can come up are good or bad for certain kinds of deck. Or alternatively, just weird. They just do something very strange, which might be good or bad entirely depending on the scenario.
Right. That's a lot to take in.
Oh, and I suppose the last thing that I should say about it is that there are just a ton of cards available for it. So they definitely haven't done all of the Marvel characters. There are others available, I'm sure, but I struggle to think of the ones that they haven't included, to be fair. There are so many cards, and like there are characters that I mean, I'm not a huge Marvel person. I've enjoyed the some of the recent films, I've enjoyed some of the TV series that have come out, but I never really kind of followed the comics very much or anything like that. But there are lots and lots of characters that I've never even heard of.
I was going to say Marvel's been knocking around for 83 years apparently. So I mean, that's a big pool of people to pull from.
Yeah, I mean, just think about the X-Men. You basically got all of those, and the bad guys from that as well. All of the villains. So,
hang on, Magneto.
Magneto, Magneto moves cards that are of a certain value to his lane.
Peter, who is your favorite Marvel person?
Who is my favorite Marvel person? I'm kind of a Spider-Man person. I like Spider-Man.
Which is your favorite movie Spider-Man?
I really like the new one, actually.
Yeah, Tom Holland is great.
Yeah, I think he's really good.
I'd say it's probably Tom Holland as well.
Yeah.
My favorite Marvel guy is Galactus. Just because he's bananas, it's brilliant. He's just a huge purple dude who eats planets.
Galactus is a card.
Of course he is.
Galactus destroys the other two locations if he is the only person in that location, which has quite a calamitous effect on the game when it is played, to be fair. It's very very dramatic card, that one.
Do his heralds make it in? I'm assuming they do. Like the Silver Surfer.
Oh, the Silver Surfer is actually the card of the month this time that you get from the Battle Pass, and I am really enjoying the Silver Surfer.
It won't be by the time you listen to this, viewers.
No, that's true.
Hope you didn't want that one or anything.
I mean, if you're really quick, you might be able to squeeze in.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. Not sure how that works. They go in 4-week cycles, so maybe not.
Right.
But yeah, it's It's fun. It's got all sorts of different strategies that you can employ, and because the decks are so small, it's just really trivially easy just to try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't, never mind. You can move on with your life.
Well, that's fine, isn't it? That's fine.
So, what about you then? What have you been doing, eh?
I'm going to go off piste and talk about something that we didn't discuss in the pre-podcast briefing.
Didn't know we were on piste.
I think we're generally on piste.
Mm.
Listeners, if you think that we're generally on or off piste, why not write into us whatever the email address for this podcast is and let us know. Only long-term listeners of the podcast get to know what the email address is.
What curveball are you going to throw at me?
So it's even tangentially related to the topic of the podcast. Do you remember that?
No.
And it's the game Among Us. Do you remember Among Us?
Among Us.
Among Us.
Mm.
All the memes. Yeah, no. They added an expansion pack recently, which has added a whole new game mode called Hide and Seek.
Yes.
Where, okay, so just briefly, if you've been living under a rock or something, you don't know what Among Us is and you haven't played it. It's a game, a social deduction game where you're all little bean-like dudes on a spaceship, and one of you is one or more of you is the imposter who can kill other players.
Yeah.
So as the imposter, you've got to go around the ship looking like a normal person, and then sneakily isolate someone on their own and kill them, and then get away from the scene of the crime before you're discovered. If you're not the imposter, you're just a crewmate, and you've got to go around the ship doing tasks to help you. Crewmates win by filling a task completion bar. So they're little nothing jobs that you do, which mean that you win the game if you aren't all killed by the thing. But the important part really is when a body is discovered or when somebody presses the emergency meeting button, all the crewmates are gathered in one room, and there's time to sort of verbally discuss who you think done it, and then you all vote. And if enough of you vote for the same person, that person will be thrown out of the airlock or destroyed in some other manner, depending on which level of the game you're playing on. So again, here, if you're the imposter, you've got to try and cast suspicion on people who aren't you.
Yeah.
So they added a new game mode recently called Hide and Seek, which is a sort of total inversion of the game's normal mechanics, where you know who the imposter is from the start because they fall over in the cafeteria and they sort of burst into a horrible creature, and you have to run and hide from them somewhere on the ship. And they've made it a bit harder in some ways by like turning the lights out in the ship, so you only sort of get by default like a little flashlight that illuminates a tiny area around you.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to kind of go and hide in random places in the ship, and the imposter will chase you around. And as the game gets into its last 10 seconds, I think it is 30 seconds, something like that, the imposter starts getting a sort of ping on their screen, which shows them where players are hiding. So you can't just find a really good hiding place and chill it out the entire time. You have to escape, basically. And I've been playing that a lot recently, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's I think on the whole, I still prefer the original game mode, but this one is a real nice thing for when you just want to play a quick game of it and you don't want to spend a long time getting into a session with like random people or whatever.
Yeah.
This one you could just drop into anything, anywhere, and it's basically you're just playing hide and seek online, and it's fun.
Yeah, I've played a few rounds of this with you, and I think afterwards I kind of described it as in a weird way, it's simultaneously more and less intense than the original game mode, because it's very hectic while you're playing.
Yeah.
But also the stakes are very low. So if you're if you are the imposter, that you're just having fun running around, chasing people, or or if you're not, you're just kind of running away from the sound of the music that gets more intense as the
Yeah, I wanted to mention the music. So they've added a sort of dangeometer to know how close the imposter is to you. So by default, you don't hear anything, but as they get closer, a bar sort of fills from yellow to red, and then this sort of sinister rock music gets louder and louder until they're right on top of you, and it's very creepy.
Yeah, it's pretty effective. It's pretty intense. Well, while you're playing it, you're running around, you're panicking, but also the stakes are so low because the game's over in a few minutes, and then you just move on with your life. So it's an interesting kind of mix of more and less intense, I think.
The only downside I've found to it so far is if you're playing like in a huge game with like 15 people, and you get killed fairly early on, like, as opposed to the normal game mode where you can sort of still finish your task. There's just nothing to do. You just have to sort of spectate for a couple of minutes, which it could be a bit boring. But like you say, the games are over so quickly, it doesn't matter that much, really. I'd say the optimum sort of game size for this is like 7 or 8 people.
Yeah, and it does work as well if you've got a bit of a smaller group. So maybe if you've only been able to rustle up a few of your friends, and you think, maybe it's not that going to be that great playing the main mode, you can do a few quick rounds of this. That works. As for Among Us in general, I guess I like it because I like social deduction games. I don't know that I love it. And I think that might be for reasons that, weirdly enough, we could get into when we start getting back on topic and talking about this film.
Yeah, so let's save that for then. And also, Among Us will come up later as well, organically. So that's going to be fun. No, I've got a special spot in my heart for Among Us. I really, like everybody else, I discovered it in 2020 when the world was locked down. And I've sunk about 70 hours into it, which is like not much compared to sort of the average player. It's like thousands of hours, but I really enjoy it. Like if ever I've got like a like half hour free, I'm like, yeah, all right. And I think adding this new mode is going to get me going back to it. Also, I'm very keen to end this podcast and go and play Among Us now, because they've added Benoit Blanc's outfit from Glass Onion
they have
as a downloadable content thing today.
That
yeah, they've added it today. So
gotta get that.
Oh, hang on. Should we do one of those things like we did for the Stanley Parable, where you start, where I live stream starting the game? Hang on, I'm starting Among Us on my laptop.
All right.
I want to see if it's there.
Okay.
This is great listening. Hang on, game starting.
All right, and so now people are going to see if it was there some weeks ago.
Here's a gift from the crew. Benoit Blanc, redeem. Yeah, there we go.
It was there.
Brilliant.
Wasn't that thrilling?
Is that an outfit? Oh yeah, there it is.
It's not the one that I would have gone with, actually, but I like it.
Yeah. What's the one you would have gone with?
I probably would have gone with the one from the film poster, the kind of light suit with the blue shirt, that kind of look.
Okay, I think this is more memorable, but sure.
And it's kind of got a necktie thing going on as well with that one, I believe. Yeah.
So, if I could briefly return to the piece, I can't remember. Are we pretending that we recorded this straight away after the last one, or are we not pretending that?
I don't think it matters, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to create a cohesive narrative universe for the listeners. Where would they be without a CNU?
I mean, if they are following along, it's probably been a while since they listened to the last one, unless
Oh
they
yeah.
listened to them together for some reason.
You're saying if I didn't bring it up, it wouldn't have been a problem. But now that I've brought it up, it is a problem.
Yeah, you've created a
fault in the CNU.
That's not what I was going to say.
I know.
I can't even remember what I was going to say now. I wanted to say something like a rod for your own back, but I don't think that's quite what I mean.
Also, I'm fine with that not being the thing. So, I went to the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge the other day. They said evasively. So. It is a museum in Cambridge, which is dedicated to the history of computer science, because, as they kind of put it, technology moves so quickly, and there's such a push to sort of replace obsolete technology with more modern things, that there's a real chance that those sort of early days things could just vanish because they were just like, whatever, threw them away. And only now, sort of looking back on them, nearly 80 years in the future, you're like, wish we hadn't burned all of those things or whatever.
I mean, we have this experience in our lives, right? The old game consoles that we wish we'd never thrown away, and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Some of them, a lot of the exhibits they have are computers that I own, because I collect old computers. So going through I wasn't expecting to be like skewered so many times walking through a museum being like, this is an old thing from the distant past. And it was a fucking Xbox, man. Just an Xbox. They're 20 years old, Peter.
They're quite old now. Yeah, that's vintage.
It's prehistoric. Mm. Anyway, so existential crisis aside, it's a really nice place to visit. In the main sort of entry hall, they have the world's biggest microprocessor, I think, which is just a microprocessor that's been built up of like tiny little chunks. So it's spread out across a whole wall, and you can sort of trace instructions traveling through it, that sort of thing, and it's all displayed with LEDs, which is really cool to look at.
That's cool.
There's even a control panel. You can sort of play Tetris on it, and there's like a ratchet that you can control the clock speed, so you can turn it down to almost nothing, so you can like literally see sort of like the LEDs going bloop, 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 bloop through and follow the instructions and read about them. Or you can turn it up to sort of like, something reasonable and playable.
Right.
That room also has some arcade cabinets that I played. Oh god, I think it was Alien Breed, and I'm not as good as that as I was as a child. Well, I remember playing that, and it sort of loudly announces that you're bad at it when you die, and it did that 3 times in quick succession, and then I had to leave and go to a different room in the museum so no one could see my shame.
How often do you ever go back to old games? I mean, I guess you did then, but I mean, I feel like I often go back to old games. I'm like, how did I just play this as a child? How did I put up with any of this?
Yeah, no, I spent some time setting up a RetroPie, a Raspberry Pi with an operating system called RetroPie that allows you to play emulated games. Yeah. And yeah, no, some of them are really fun still, but also very hard. Like, games used to just be derangedly hard for no reason.
It does make you kind of appreciate when there is a game that you can go back to, which just feels sort of timeless, and it still almost feels as good as it was at the time. The one I remember going back to, which I'm always sort of in awe of when I go back to it, because it feels so much ahead of all of the similar things that were happening at the time, was like Super Mario Brothers 3, because it's just such a competent platformer on the NES, which really barely had any that hold up. I mean, even the original Mario is competent, but like the third one is kind of on another level.
Yeah, I mean, mine is Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Mm.
Because I don't know if you know, but the two games were originally just Sonic 3. But the game was so big that they decided to split it into two games instead. Which is why Sonic and Knuckles has this incredibly strange sort of feature that comes from the cartridge era, where you can play it on its own and it's fine, or you can like slide back the game's foreskin and slot Sonic 3 in on top, and like suddenly sorry,
pretty sure it's not called that.
That's the technical term. And yeah, suddenly you've got like a 22 level game with Knuckles added in. It's really good, like feature.
I have one of those. Yeah.
You have a Sonic 3 and Knuckles.
Yeah, somewhere. I can't remember where, but I've got one somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, fancy. So in the museum, then you go into sort of like a main space where all the exhibits really are, and it's lots of sort of vintage computers all set up that you can just sort of play with and have a go. Most of them. There's a surprising amount of like small things you can play with. I wonder how many of those are walking out the door. I mean, like little PDAs and things that you can look at. And definitely there's some mobile phones in there that I have owned at some point.
Got your 3310, surely.
Yeah, no, they got one of those. They actually have the Apple Mac that Douglas Adams owned and wrote some of Hitchhiker's Guide on, which is quite nice.
Nice.
Yeah, they have a machine, like a giant IBM mainframe thing from the same series as the one from Deep Blue, the chess computer. It's not the same one, and you can play chess against it. But I didn't have a go because I can't play chess, and like when I was there were some children sort of very intently playing chess against it. I was like, okay. One of the things I quite liked was they have a computer in there that ran the Bakerloo line, and it was installed in 1989.
Okay.
And it ran the Bakerloo line until 2021. That's quite recent. That's a long time.
Yeah, that's vaguely impressive.
Yeah, but they've got loads of fun stuff to look at. A lot of my favorite sort of category of vintage computer, which is like they're called luggables. So it predates the laptop, but it's a computer you can take with you, but you really fucking wish you weren't because it weighs as much as a house. And it predates the invention of any good screen technology, so the screen will be sort of very pale grey on very dark green, which is not readable.
It's like when they used to call things portable TVs when they weren't really.
They also have a recreation of a 70s office that you can go into, down to like the carpet, and there's a cardigan you can wear if you want.
What do you mean there's a cardigan you can wear if you want?
There's a cardigan hanging up. It instructs you to put the cardigan on, take a picture, and share it with them.
If you want.
Yeah. I chose not to wear the cardigan because I thought that was a bit weird. But it's a recreation of a 70s office, so there's like a TV, like a 70s TV, and they're showing a 70s program and like a 70s computer you can have a go on. Which I admit I was trying to write a little basic program on, but like one of the keys was broken, so I couldn't run it. So I was like, oh well, never mind. I suppose that's a downside to having a museum where people can touch stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, they had an acoustic coupler, Peter.
Okay.
That's that predates the modem. It's literally sort of like a rubber headset thing that you drop your phone into. Yeah.
Yeah, it listens and on one end and speaks on the other end. Yeah. With the beeps and the squawks.
Yeah, the thing I did best at was Sonic 3, which I spent some time playing. They also have an 80s classroom
Okay.
with a lot of sort of BBC Acorn things, the BBC micros and the games that they played that they came with that you can have a go on. And it's fine. I had a real good time there. I enjoyed it.
That sounds good.
Yeah. They've got a little gift shop on the way out, and I bought a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk as a treat because I've never possessed one, and now I do.
You've never possessed a 5 1/4 inch floppy disk?
I've
really?
never possessed a 5 1/4 inch floppy. Well, I do now.
I used to have quite a few. I had a BBC Micro.
No, the BBC Micro is the white whale of my old computer collection. I never managed to get one, and now they've moved out of the sort of a lot of the old sort of vintage computers have moved from garbage to like nostalgia item. I mean, because about 10, 15 years ago, you could pick these things up for nothing, like £5 or whatever, and great, now they sell for hundreds because they know people are looking for them, and like obviously time and attrition has taken the supply down.
Right, because they were in basically every school.
Yeah, there were billions of them, and now there aren't.
Well.
Yeah, but I would go if you get the chance. You can't go today if you're listening to this on the day this podcast comes out because they're closed for Christmas until the 2nd of January. There's a public service announcement on their behalf.
There you go.
Oh dear. Okay, so I think we should explain the concept of this podcast now, which honestly I think we probably should have done at the start, but we didn't do because that intro came apart like a cake in a hurricane.
If you got this far not knowing what you're listening to, then well
good on
done.
you. Yeah, okay, so we went to see in the actual cinema, TM, the sequel to Knives Out. It's called Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, a title we have issue with, but never mind. And we're releasing 2 special episodes of the podcast, one of which in which we discuss it without spoilers. That was the one that hopefully you've listened to already. And this one, which will be spoiler rich. So if you've made it, 40 minutes into this podcast without knowing what this is, and you want to go and watch Glass Onion without being spoiled, go and do it now. Turn off the podcast, press pause, or however you're listening to this. Go away and come back after you've watched it, because it's genuinely great. And you don't want to spoil it by listening to 2 weird pricks talk about it for 5 hours beforehand.
Yes.
I'm sorry I called you a weird prick, Peter.
It's all right. There was some truth to
it. I'm not that sorry. I feel we may begin.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. I wasn't sure which one of us was waiting for who. All right.
I think it's for whom.
No. No. I was thinking about whom the other day. I was thinking we should get rid of the whole thing. Like in German, they're consistent. At least they've got complex ass grammar rules about how you change the words based on the case and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't like it at all. But at least they're consistent about it. Here we just have some words that do it as kind of holdovers from history, and other times we just don't care. It's not good enough.
Ich bin sehr hungrig, Peter.
And that being the case, let's get on with this. So it opens up in old early COVID times, doesn't it? This film.
Yeah, and that's an interesting place to start. I think it's the first media thing that I've seen really just sink its teeth into the whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be the only one, but yeah, they literally start, in lockdown. Everyone's wearing masks, making their own sourdough bread. Oh Christ, do you remember that?
Yeah,
Did,
all of that sort of thing.
did you give that a go?
I didn't do any bread making myself.
Oh, I learned how to make brioche buns, and let me tell you, it don't. It's so much fucking work. It's so much easier to just pay someone to do it for you.
Yeah, I know many people who had a bread making phase. I was never tempted myself.
Yeah, I also learned how to make sticky buns, and honestly, you can go from having no sticky buns to having sticky buns in about 20 minutes, and it's worth it because they're delicious.
And I suppose I've listened to a couple of interviews with Ryan Johnson and others since watching the film, and something that they comment on is that the like Agatha Christie stories were always, I mean, they feel like period pieces now, obviously, but at the time they were very contemporary. Really, they were talking about things that were going on at the time,
Yeah,
and stuff like that, and they wanted to kind of emulate that with
exactly.
these films.
I think I brought that up in the last episode that where
Mm.
they're very zeitgeisty
Yeah,
and yeah. So like the Sherlock Holmes stories and Agatha Christie stories, they seem very period, like perfect little period pieces of, but they're not. They were written about the issues of the day, and they've just aged.
yeah. So I think that's a really interesting choice, and I have quite a lot of respect for it. And in this case, yeah, it is stuff that's uh, very recently happened, but also is weirdly nostalgic in a
I was
way,
gonna
even
say
so.
it felt like I watched it and he's got his mask on, and I felt weirdly nostalgic. I was like, it happened less than 2 years ago.
But so much happened in those 2 years that you can tell the difference between like early COVID vibes and late COVID vibes. So here
Yeah.
you have a kind of situation where everyone's sort of still getting used to it,
Mm.
doesn't quite know what to do, but they're sort of kind of muddling through and trying their best, which is very different to the kind of vibes that you get later, where so many people are just fed up with it and have given up, and while other people are still sticking to it. Here, you just have you have the kind of camps of people that there were at the beginning of it, where you have people who are just um, going by the rules, people who are trying their best but making kind of mistakes,
Mm.
and people who are just not doing it very well at all, but maybe don't realize it, and people who just are ignoring the whole thing
Yeah.
and are exactly the people that you expect to ignore the whole thing.
Mm.
So you get the whole range of those characters in this film, and we kind of start out meeting all of these characters, getting sent a kind of special box, a
Mm.
puzzle box of
A puzzle
some
box.
um, I would be very excited to receive something like this.
And there are services you can subscribe to where they send you a thing like every month like this, but I don't think in any near as detailed as this.
I'm really surprised I haven't done that, to be honest, yet, because it feels like something that would be very on brand for me. I like messing around with puzzles. I have a
Yeah,
puzzle advent calendar this year. It's quite good.
yeah. I mean, periodically, I think about subscribing you to one for like your birthday or something, but they're too expensive.
Yeah, you'd have to do it forever. Mm.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they have this puzzle box, and I'm very proud to say that I immediately knew what the first step of the puzzle was. As soon as I saw the box, I was like, "This is what this is," and it took them ages to get it as well,
Hmm.
because the first thing that you see is the box is just kind of blank, and there's no way into it, and and so that's confusing because you think, oh, where's the mechanism to open the box? And it turns out that it's a stereogram picture, which I recognized as soon as I saw the box, that the grain of the wood was a kind of repeating looking pattern, which you can kind of magic eye
Yeah,
into.
so stereograms are those magic eye pictures, in case you don't know.
Yes,
that were popular in the distant past, but then we invented iPads. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. I had a technique for getting them instantly, so I never had any trouble with those. I always knew exactly how to get them because I'd discovered the effect by accident as a child.
Wow.
You know how when you look down when you look at a radiator from above, it has that kind of corrugated bit.
Yes, I think that part's called the radiator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as opposed to the outside,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
it's got that corrugate. Well, I remember being at my grandma's place or something and just looking down the back of a radiator like that and just unfocusing my eyes in a certain way to make one of the bits of corrugated go into the next one and overlap, and noticed that you could kind of hold it there and it would look funny. So I had like tons of practice with stereograms, and then when it became a real fad,
Yeah.
I was like, I've been training.
The old radiator technique.
I've been training for this all my life, and so I was really good at them from the start. And I didn't really understand why some people just can't do them.
Yeah, I always kind of had a problem with them. The only one I can remember really getting first time easily was, do you remember the TV program Tomorrow's World?
I do remember it, yes.
A BBC technology show. So one time, for some reason, they had one on the show, but it was animated. So it was sort of like a thing that was rotating, and you could look at it. And yeah, for some reason, that on a screen I found a lot easier than the sort of Magic Eye picture books that were going around at the time.
Yeah. And the other practice I got as a child is, of course, doing that thing where you put your fingers together in front of your eyes and then you make a little sausage.
Oh, the floating sausage! I love the floating. I actually did the floating sausage the other day. I can't remember why, and
It's exactly the same as a floating sausage. That's all if you can make a floating sausage, you can do a magic eye. That's what I've always said.
Yeah, that's one of the many things I'm having written on your tombstone.
Yeah. So if you're wondering how to do a magic eye, just make the floating sausage.
I'm doing the floating sausage right now, which is not great listening, I'm forced to admit.
Yeah. So this is going great so far. We've got so far to the
first
box
minute or two of the film.
Yeah, and they're all kind of these people that you start getting introduced to, the different characters in the film. They start to contact each other because they all realize that they've all received this box and are trying to collectively solve the different puzzles in it.
Yeah, and we see we're with each of the characters a little bit here, and we spoke about them last time. So I don't think we'll go into them too much at the start here, but yeah, and they all, so they all puzzle out these boxes, except we see one character who, and we see her take a very unusual approach to opening the box.
Right, just taking a hammer straight to it.
She puts on a pair of safety goggles and smashes the thing up with a hammer to get inside.
Yeah, and she's kind of clearly quite just pissed off with the whole thing. She is not happy with having this thing, wants to get into it, but it has no time for its shit, basically.
Yeah.
And so after you... and that's Janelle Monáe's character, by the way, just in case that wasn't clear. Everyone who is listening to this has presumably seen the film, so you'll know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then we get to Benoit Blanc, don't we? After that,
we spend some time with Benoit Blanc, seeing how he's dealing with lockdown. And spoilers, it's not well. So he's spending all of his time in the bath.
Yes,
and I think what I thought the most hilarious moment, he's fucking playing Among Us.
Yes,
with a bunch of famous people.
Yes, he is. And by the way, wearing the most ridiculous bath hat I have ever seen in my life. Wherever they found that, I've got to imagine they just found that somewhere.
Yes.
It's a great choice.
And Benoit Blanc, it turns out, is not very good at Among Us. And he is playing with, well, two of the people making cameos here are Angela Lansbury and Stephen Sondheim.
Yes.
Sort of people who Rian Johnson has a lot of respect for and really wanted to work with, who both unfortunately passed away after this film was made.
Yes.
So this is sort of the last performance for both of them. But yeah, he's. I like that he's having a lot of trouble dealing with the lack of stimulation, because that's extremely similar to Sherlock Holmes between cases, as we've seen a lot of times in the Sherlock Holmes canon. Rather than fall into the arms of cocaine, right. Benoit Blanc has chosen endless baths.
Yeah, it's just baths. I think that so I like Among Us. I like to play Among Us. I like it fine, not as much as you do, but I enjoy it when I play it. But weirdly enough, I think when I struggle with Among Us, I think it might be for similar reasons that Benoit Blanc struggles with Among Us, which is that it can just kind of stop. Sometimes games just fizzle for not very interesting reasons, and that's kind of his complaint when he plays the game, because he's in the clip of it that we see, he's the imposter and he does a murder, and people see the murderer and they say, "We saw you do it," and he's like, "Oh, so that's it then." And there's no kind of intrigue, there's no mystery, and so something that I think is good about a lot of social deduction games is that the way that they're designed to protect you against just making catastrophic mistakes for the most part, as one of the imposters. You can still do it, but it's kind of hard to do it if you're paying close attention, and the problem I sometimes have with Among Us is that sometimes you can just get unlucky and just get caught, and then the game ends. And so if you had any plan, or if you had we're having a nice time with it, and you just got unlucky, someone just walked by at the wrong moment, that's just kind of it. And there's nothing, and there's not very much that you can do to talk yourself out of that. That said, with Among Us, some of the new modes that they've started to introduce where you can play different roles and stuff have started to mix that up a bit in a way that I like. So we played a game a couple of months ago, I seem to remember, where I just brazenly did a murder in front of everyone and then proceeded to get away with the whole thing.
Were you shape-shifting?
I was shape-shifting, yes.
Yeah, I thought you'd like that one.
Yeah. So they've done some things to mitigate that, and there's been some smart design on it since this early version of Among Us that we're seeing in the film. But yeah, I have to admit, I sort of get Benoit Blanc's gripe with it sometimes.
And this is also the point where Benoit Blanc receives a box as well, isn't it?
He does, yes, but we don't see the box. We just see that something has arrived. And that's important later.
And this will be important later, yes.
Yes. And so they all start arriving at the island in Greece.
Yeah, so everybody turns up, all of the cast that we've introduced, and Blanc himself. Rian Johnson said that he took inspiration for this movie from tropical getaway murder mysteries like Evil Under the Sun.
Yeah.
Which is a Hercule Poirot story, which I quite like. It's not one of my favorites, but it's up there. It's good.
I don't think I'm familiar with that one, so don't give anything away.
They all go to an island and murders occur, and Poirot solves them.
Okay.
I'll have to show it to you, Peter. There's a 1970s version of it with Peter Ustinov as Poirot. That's pretty funny. It's not as good as the 70s Death on the Nile, where everyone is aggressively chewing the scenery all throughout it. And that would be a great movie to recommend to anyone if it wasn't for a really awkward racist character that was probably bad at the time and is just worse now.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Something probably worth noting is that yes, the box it contains an invitation to the island as well, and there's a couple of things that I like about this. An invitation from Miles Bron, the tech billionaire at the center of this.
Yeah,
and I like a couple of things about it, and it's a theme that kind of recurs as well as we get into it. I like that he just says what the whole thing is going to be. Just said you're going to be solving my murder. So there's no surprise to it even. Like he could have even didn't even say a murder. It just says what's going to happen, and then once they get to the island, just keeps on talking about the fact that it's going to happen. So it's done so ham-fistedly, just done in the like in the stupidest possible way that it could be done, you know. And in a way that it's you know, it's all about him.
I think we should probably also mention that when they turn up at the dock to travel to the island, they're all sprayed by one of Miles's henchmen,
right?
And this is some sort of miraculous COVID cure, or at least something that removes it from consideration for the rest of the movie, which is good. So we don't have to, like, you know, that was a fun thing to start with, but it has been addressed and just taken out of the picture.
Yeah, I mean, you can read it a couple of ways, I guess. Either you can read it that Miles, just through being a billionaire, has access to some sort of technology before everyone else, and is and just uses it, or he thinks he does, but he definitely doesn't, which I think is probably more likely.
So they all arrive on the island, and they're shown around by Bron, who shows them sort of the island's many features. So it's like his own sort of private island, and it has you know, sort of swimming pool and like a private garden and things. But it also has the glass onion, which is a big glass onion in the middle that lights up in an interesting way.
Yeah, it's very showy.
It's an attractive centerpiece.
Yeah, it's both. It's simultaneously really impressive to look at and just kind of ludicrous.
Very ostentatious.
Yeah, just very silly.
So I think it's at this point that we learn that Blanc wasn't invited.
No, he wasn't sent a box.
And they have a brief discussion about it. There's another amazing Blanc quote here where he looks into sort of a light fixture at the middle of the glass onion and he says, "My God, it's full of stars." And then he turns around and he says, "2010, the year we make contact." And it's just like the quote is much famously from the first film, 2001. Why would he prefer the sequel?
Yeah, we talked about this one, and I believe that film, that line, I think it does open 2010. I think that's the first thing that you hear in the film 2010, but extremely famously, it's from the end of 2001. I'm pretty sure about that.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. That's where I remembered it from. I couldn't remember it being in 2010, and I haven't rewatched it to check. So maybe, I don't know.
2001, the infinitely more famous film.
It has to be said Benoit is being a real goofball at this
Yeah.
the movie, and I was a little hesitant here because I wasn't sure if they were just if he was being sort of overplayed by Daniel Craig. But then stuff happened, and it turned out I needn't have worried at all.
And I think the thing that justifies it as well to me is that, how do I put this? I guess he's still in this mode of suddenly he has a chance to interact with people in what is a mystery. And it's after everything that's happened with COVID, this is all kind of a novelty and amusement for him. And we get some really fun quotes about how refreshing and amusing he's finding this thing that's been put together, which he finds much less impressive than Miles Brom would like him to find it. I think.
And he does seem a little uncomfortable and out of place with sort of the idle rich at play.
Yes. Which is very in character. We've known that he. I was going to say he doesn't suffer fools gladly, but I don't think that's quite right. He does actually suffer fools quite gladly, and for as long as he has to, and then will
turn.
then we'll turn. I think we saw that in the last one as well, where the audience could see the cracks, could see where he wasn't buying into their shit, but they don't see it until that point where it turns, which I think is something very much borrowed from Columbo.
Yeah,
as a character.
So what happens now? I was going to say what happens next, but that's a different part of the podcast.
Well, he kind of warns Miles that he thinks that he might be in some danger, and he kind of doesn't really take it particularly seriously. And later they go downstairs to kind of start the murder mystery thing that Miles has arranged.
Right. I think before that we spend some time with the other characters and sort of learn a little bit more about them and see, like, setting up some of their obvious motives in the style of a detective movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we end up in the frankly hilarious scene involving the murder mystery.
Yes, and it's as soon as, or maybe just before he asks, have we started yet?
Yeah,
I realized, oh, he's already solved it.
So there's two sort of hilarious Benoit Blanc moments here. Well, like one where he, just as they're setting up, he asks if there's a prize.
Yes, if there's a prize.
Is there a prize? And like Miles is sort of abuses, like, what do you want? And Benoit's like, an iPad, and he's like, sure. And he's like, no, I'm. He just sort of comes apart, like not really knowing.
I don't want anything. I just thought there
would be a prize.
A prize, like an iPad or something. Like, fine, there's an iPad.
Yeah, and then he says, "Are we playing right now?" Miles says yes, and Benoit immediately stands up and just explains the whole thing
before he even gets murdered as well. Yeah. And another bit that happens just before that, which I really enjoy, which kind of goes back to Miles setting this up in the most stupid, self-indulgent way possible, is one of them asks, are you going is that it then? After the murder, are you just going to be kind of dead then? And he's like, oh no, I'm not going to play dead all weekend. I'll still hang out with you and stuff like that. He's not even going to commit to the bit. He's just going to say, "Ooh, I'm dead." I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he'd even go that far.
No,
He'd just be there gloating as they try to puzzle it out. And
right.
yeah, so the whole scene where Benoit goes through the whole thing is sort of hilariously bookended by a crossbow firing on a timer and like a fake crossbow thing coming out of Miles's chest.
Yes. And and so yeah, he solves the whole thing immediately. It completely explains the method of the murder, who did it, and what their motive is as well, from things that had been introduced over the course of the kind of introduction to the film, and is completely on top of the whole thing.
Miles takes him separately alone upstairs and throws an iPad at him.
Yeah. Yes. And I think as he goes upstairs, he's kind of he's explaining. Oh, it was so refreshing. It was like doing one of those mini crosswords.
Yeah. I think we should also point out that he earlier in the movie when they're solving the puzzle boxes, it takes them hours and hours, and eventually they're all working together. And Benoit Blanc says it was a puzzle box guarded by children's puzzles.
Yeah, which we later find out that he didn't actually do the puzzles because he got the broken box, but it just goes to show that he's much more in control at this point in the story than he kind of initially lets on.
Yeah,
he's playing with them a bit.
So it's at this point, I think he's also warned Miles that everyone there has a motive to kill him.
Yes.
And will probably use this weekend as an excuse to kill him.
Yes.
Which Miles has sort of shrugged off.
And so then they go off to just kind of have a normal rest of the day, and some of them start talking about how they'll maybe just leave tomorrow or whatever, and they're just enjoying some drinks and things until
there's a big argument with Andy, who is the former sort of co-owner of the company with Miles, and everyone is surprised that she came. And she storms off and disappears because basically everyone sort of sided against her with Miles, even though Miles was lying in a court case about who owns Alpha, the company as a whole. And she sort of accuses them all of being, sort of just desperately clinging to his coattails, and disappears.
Yeah.
And a little while after that, Duke, the sort of incredibly repulsive MRA activist guy, suddenly drops down dead.
Yes. And at first it seems like his drink has been poisoned. But then after looking at it for a minute, Miles notices that it's his glass because his name is on it. Of course it is.
Yeah. So he becomes incredibly convinced and that everyone is now out to kill him, and paranoid, literally physically hiding behind Benoit Blanc.
Yeah, he's kind of running all over the place and acting very scared, and basically trying to flee from the others.
But unfortunately, he'd set up a timer related to the murder mystery, which he hadn't shut down, and all of the lights go out.
Somewhere in all of this as well, we get an explanation of that clear stuff as well, which is very relevant to the story.
Yeah.
Isn't it? So it's just this kind of wonder fuel that has been invented, but it and is powering this whole complex, but it turns out has a really dangerous what am I
Side
trying to
effect?
say? I guess, yeah, a really dangerous downside, I guess, which makes it not really practical to use as a fuel.
Yeah, it's very stable, very energy efficient, but it leaks hydrogen gas, which is explosive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's trying to kind of push this for a wider release.
Yeah,
And
he wants it adopted in fuel stations worldwide, and also to do manned space launches with it.
but a couple of the people,
crude space launches.
Yes, but a couple of the people are worried about that, and you see them talking about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the power in the place goes out. Everyone's looking for what's the name of the character?
Andy?
Andy, that's right. Who has gone off somewhere? The gun's gone missing as well.
Yeah.
And eventually, Blanc meets up with Andy outside, and he's trying to get some information out of her. Because, he believes that she knows some information, but before she can say anything, she gets shot.
And it's a very surprising moment. I until it was very clearly telegraphed, I didn't see this coming.
Yeah. She gets shot through a window, so you don't see who it was, and falls down, and you see Blanc kind of in tears as well. And then the others come rushing over, and then shortly after that, we go into flashback mode.
Yeah, and I was wondering how they were gonna twist the movie this time, because obviously, as we spoke about in Knives 8 for Knives Out, it's not a whodunit. It starts out with one sort of movie, then it twists to another sort of movie, then it twists back to a whodunit at the end. And I was wondering how they were going to do it this time. And what they've done is sort of throw a whole bunch of information that you can't quite put the plot together without into a flashback.
Yes.
Like a lengthy flashback.
A very long one, yeah. And I think the first thing that you see is the moment that Blanc receives the box, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, you get to see his partner.
Yeah, Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant in this. Wonder if it will be a different celebrity partner each time.
I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Hugh Grant, or if Hugh Grant is an actor.
I felt the same way about the guests on the Among Us game. Yeah.
But yeah, his partner's there, Hugh Grant, with a fucking sourdough.
Yeah. And they take receipt of this box, which is the broken puzzle box. So immediately you realize that there was no puzzle box for him. It was this other puzzle box that Andy receives. And you think, oh, okay, so the twist is actually that he maybe had some contact with Andy before all of this. And that sort of is the twist, but then you kind of gradually reveal that there are kind of twists upon that twist, kind of over and over for the next for the next part of the film.
So the big twist here is that Janelle Monáe is playing two characters.
Yes,
she's playing Andy, and also her sister Helen.
Yes,
who was a school teacher rather than a CEO. And it turns out that Andy died like a week or so before the events of the film. She was found dead in her car, having apparently committed suicide. But Helen knows that she would never do that.
Yes, and the other important detail of that is that they, having discovered this, I think it's Blanc is able to pull some strings, right, to conceal it from going to press immediately.
Yeah, he can suppress it for a week.
Yeah. So he pulls in some favors to conceal it, and they jointly hatch a plan to get to the bottom of what happened, which is that she will accompany him to the island as Andy.
And pretending to be aloof while doing her rich bitch voice.
Right. And kind of sneaking around investigating things while Blanc draws attention, basically. And so we get to revisit some of the different events that happened during the film from the perspective of the character kind of sneaking around and looking at stuff behind the scenes, and we also just see a few things from other angles as well. So we see, for example, that what's the name of that character? The MRA's girlfriend. What's
Whiskey?
Whiskey, yeah. So we see Whiskey isn't really cheating on him. She's she's doing it for him.
Yeah.
In order to just kind of seduce Miles and into getting stuff out of him, basically.
She's trying to get Duke a role on Alpha News, his very expensive news channel.
Yeah, and he's watching in a kind of intense way, I guess, because he is invested in the outcome of that. And we see some other things from other perspectives as well. And
I think a thing we should probably address that we didn't is Helen suspects that the reason that Andy was killed is that we mentioned the court case before. It all sort of hinges on a cocktail napkin upon which like sort of the original idea for Alpha is written.
Yes.
And Miles claims that he wrote it and is thus, the owner of the ideas, and Andy claimed that she did, but she'd lost it. But she found it again and sent everyone, all the suspects, an email saying, "I'm going to tell everyone about this thing, what I've found," which honestly, from a "don't murder me" point of view, isn't great.
No, it gives everyone a great motive. To be fair, but yeah, it does all hinge on that. So she's just trying to find, because the napkin was missing as well. That was the other thing, wasn't it? That napkin that she'd found was missing from her apartment when she went to kind of clear it out and stuff. So she's looking to see if she can find the napkin anywhere on this island as well.
So we sort of learn that through her investigations that everyone has some sort of motive for wanting Miles dead. So Lionel and Claire have sort of put their reputations on the line backing Clear, even though it turns out that it's got a horrible downside. Birdie, the fashion designer, Miles is trying to force her to take responsibility for having all of her clothes made in a terrible sweatshop that she sort of inadvertently agreed. Yeah, that's quite a funny line. That she agrees to have her clothes made in a sweatshop because they're sweatpants, and that's where she thinks sweatpants are made.
Yes.
And Duke is trying to convince Miles to give him a position in Alpha News by letting whiskey seduce him.
Yes. So you get all these little tidbits that kind of change the context of some of the stuff that you saw in the first half of the film, and I think
It's really well done.
It's really, really nicely done. You kind of get that peppered throughout, so everything is put in a slightly different context to how you initially saw it. And as we were going through all of this, I remember just being really impressed with how they pulled all of that off. But then the thing that just made me kind of if it was polite in a cinema just to kind of stop and applaud a bit in the film, I was like, I think it was that they don't let on through that whole segment. You still assume that she's been killed.
Yeah.
And then right at the end, she kind of gasps and sits up and hasn't been killed, and it's another twist.
It's heartbreaking watching all this stuff because especially there's a bit where Blanc is like, we can't do this, it puts you in too much danger.
Yes.
And then he's still against it, but you can see that he has the reason he's sort of wants this now is because he's bored and he's got the sort of chase on. So he's sort of downplaying. He goes from "this is too dangerous" to "no, I think we can do this" in the space of about 2 sentences.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, his incaution has gotten her killed. This is a horrible twist.
Yeah, and you completely buy his guilt over it because you see the tears.
He was crying. He was crying.
And initially, you're like, when you first see the tears in your eyes, you think, oh well, he's probably sad that someone died, but the reaction seems really intense, and it's a bit confusing. And then as you get the flashback, and you see how he's kind of brought this on her, and the guilt that would come with that, you totally buy it. That she must have been killed because of what he kind of led her to do, and
it's his fault.
Yeah, and so it never even really crossed my mind that she'd get up after that.
Yeah,
not for a second.
That is such an old trope, getting shot in the in the Notebook or something. And it's so amazingly done here. I love the fact that Blanc makes himself cry by rubbing some of Jeremy Renner's small batch hot sauce in his eyes.
Which they also use as simulated blood, which nearly backfires in a very tense scene, doesn't it?
There's a single drop on Helen's face, slowly rolling towards her nose, and like I heard the entire audience just sort of intaking their breath.
Yeah. Very good, really great. And at this point, I was really bought into the film. At this stage.
I mean, like I said, this is the point where I was like, sort of, I was a little bit off put at the start by his sort of clownish buffoonery, but this puts it all in sharp relief, doesn't it? I mean, he's doing it to make sure that nobody is looking too closely at Andy. And it works perfectly, and it recontextualizes the whole first half of the movie. It's so clever.
It's really clever. It's the same thing as with the first film in many ways, where it is a mystery, it is a whodunit, but it plays with your expectations about what's going to happen with that. It plays with your expectation of who's going to be murdered. It plays with your expectations of the kind of the order of events and what actually happened. It is a really nice it's a really nice switch switch up of what you might expect to happen at that point in the film. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just really well done.
Yeah, I mean, because honestly, I thought Miles would be the first to die, and I was sort of counting down the seconds.
Right, yeah, because that's that's how you'd expect it to go. He invites people to his resort to investigate his,
His
quote
murder.
murder, and lo and behold, he actually gets murdered, and you kind of that's what you see coming.
Yeah.
But no, it turns out that someone else dies, but they maybe weren't the target, but then they were the target, and then it turns out that another person dies, but actually no, they didn't die, and so it really plays with your expectations about what's going to happen in one of these.
So we sort of reach the conclusion of the movie here after this big flashback where Blanc gathers them all in Miles' sort of art room, his gallery, in the Glass Onion, and he begins deducing.
Yeah, and you get some really nice Benoit Blanc bits here, as you'd expect. But I think the important thing, and it's really kind of crucial to some of the things that the film is saying, I think, is that it's not a clever murder.
No.
There's nothing.
It's nowhere near the sort of complexity of the switching the vials and the sneaking in and out of the first movie.
Right, yeah, because the plot in the first movie is actually, even before you kind of start switching stuff around, it's reasonably clever. You'd switch out some medicines, and he gets poisoned that way, and then you kind of add a layer to that by making them get switched again, and all of that sort of thing, and it becomes this kind of intricate puzzle box. And here, that's not really what you get at all. You just get, oh, actually, it's just that he switched glasses in plain sight of everyone, and just then said that
it was my glass.
It was my glass, and that is all there was to it. But he did it deliberately. He gave him that glass, and there was nothing clever about it at all, actually. And at some point, he just says something like, "It's so stupid," and then Birdie or someone says something like, "So stupid that it's actually genius," or something like that. It's like, no, it's just
stupid.
And it. And one of the reasons that in the last episode of this I was talking about how this film is really timely in a lot of ways is that I think it speaks to a lot of the leeway, a lot of the kind of genius that we ascribe to people just because they got lucky or got successful at some point at something. And it really goes at the kind of tech billionaire who actually barely has two ideas to rub together. They maybe have one good idea once, but most of what they have built is stuff that they have taken from other people, and stuff that they have taken credit for, or just isn't that clever on its face, but people just kind of assume that it's really clever because they're doing it.
There's a brilliant bit here where Blanc goes through sort of scenes we've seen earlier of Miles just being dumb, and is like, he's not a genius, he's just stupid.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing there, and I mean, I don't think that I really need to spell out where the parallels are with like this year, right? I mean, I was looking. I thought about Elon Musk more than once while I was watching this film, is what I'll say,
Yeah, it's really and scathing indictment of him.
But written years before the best example of that kind
Yeah.
of came to light with this whole Twitter thing.
Oh
And
boy.
and you see it on Twitter with people just saying, "Oh no, it's great. He's got a plan. It's going to be brilliant. It's going to be amazing." And then you see everything he does, and you start to think, "No, no, this really is just as stupid as it looks, isn't it?" No,
It's no. What is it? That there's a quite a popular tweet going around where it's like Elon Musk slams his dick in a car door, and like his fans are like, "Oh, masterful gambits."
yeah, right, yeah, that's the whole thing, and it really, I don't know whether he had Elon Musk specifically in mind when he was writing this. I think it's probably more likely that he just had that kind of person in mind. But definitely he would have been one of the names that Ryan had in mind, I'm sure.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
but it's just a really great. It's really refreshing to see a film just say no. This The emperor doesn't have any clothes on. It's just, this really is as
Rich people aren't smarter than you; they're just luckier,
right, yeah,
or had better circumstances to start with.
yeah. There's really nothing there, and it's really, in a way, cathartic in light of some things that have happened over the last few years, but especially this year as well, with the whole Twitter thing. Just to have someone call it out like that and say, "Nah, that stop saying that these people are brilliant. They're not."
And of course, we didn't address the dumbness of the murder. It's simply that Duke was allergic to pineapple juice, and
Right. Yeah.
Miles put a shot of it in his glass.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you might think that the film suffers a bit for it in a way, because you don't get the kind of amazing denouement, which is, oh, so that's how it all happened. No,
Mm.
it's the most stupid version of the murder it could possibly be. You hear it and you're like, oh, was that all? Okay. And that could be disappointing, and I think it maybe would have been if the film hadn't been so clever leading up to it. If
Yeah.
all of the stuff that you got through the second half of the film really kind of makes up for the fact that when the murder actually gets explained, it's kind of nothing. And so I didn't mind it. I didn't feel
Mm.
let down, because I was still kind of basking in the glow of the things that the film had already given me.
Plus, of course, there is another layer to the onion, if you will.
Yes.
Wherein, of course, wherein, of course,
Don't make that noise again.
I never will. No.
Yeah.
We have to address Andy's murder.
Yes.
And we find out that, of course, it was Miles who did the murder, because he was, and it's most logical for him, because he was the one who had the most to lose, because if she presents the real napkin with the idea on it, everyone will know he lied, and she will regain control of the company or whatever. I guess I was a little unclear with what happened here. I mean, because I'm not sure having a napkin proves everything quite so much as they thought, but fine.
No,
But it turns out that that's not actually necessary anyway, because
doesn't matter.
both napkins are destroyed.
Yes.
Yes. So Miles burns it, so that Helen just has no proof, even though this was sort of the only proof that he was lying. It's gone now. There's no proof, and so there's no sort of proof that he did the murder or anything. So he's like, "Ha ha! I have won, foolish mortals."
Yes.
I don't think he says that specifically, but that's the vibe.
And you then get I guess, the revenge scene where I mean, at first it plays out. You see that later on. I think that Benoit Blanc provides her with the clear that she can use to kind of blow up the glass onion.
Yeah. So it looks like Helen is just breaking Miles's toys for fun.
Right.
So she walks around the room and she smashes all of his sort of glass sculptures that are in his art lounge. Yeah. And everyone else starts joining in as well at this point, because I think they're all fed up with him.
Yeah.
And he murdered one of their friends.
Right. So they start wrecking shit, and it's kind of satisfying to watch, because at first he acts like he doesn't care, and then increasingly as they kind of carry on with it, you realize that actually it is getting to him a bit, that they're doing that. So you get some satisfaction out of that, but then you realize that, oh, she's got the clear and she is going to blow this place.
Yeah, how does she start the fire? I don't remember that. Is it the alcohol tray?
Yeah, and there's a lighter floating around, right?
Yeah.
So it must be that.
Oh yes, there's Miles's lighter that he used to burn the napkin, so that's still knocking around. Yeah, so she starts a fire. There's a bit of a flail over Chekhov's like fireproof safety override for the Mona Lisa.
Yes.
Did we mention the Mona Lisa yet in this podcast?
No, we did. I don't think we did. No, we did. We did earlier. We mentioned that he's got it.
He's got it. Yeah, he's got it from the Louvre. I think we mentioned it before we started recording the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's got it on loan from the Louvre for his private enjoyment while lockdown is happening, because no one can know it's left France or whatever.
Yes. But he's built in an override, which of course, as soon as he says that, you know at some point it's going to get used. When it first was revealed, I just wasn't sure whether it was going to be used somehow for the murder.
Yes,
because as soon as the barrier gets triggered, which it gets triggered by the smallest thing, it gets triggered by like slightly loud noises,
or turn lighter,
or by messages being received on a phone, like that triggers it. And I was thinking, at some point someone's going to set it up so someone's like standing nearby or something, and then they get it closed on them or something when they send a message on their phone or something like that. And that's going to be the murder. And no, it has nothing to do with that. It's just the override. And so after the whole place is on fire, she races Miles to the button, gets there first, presses it, and yes, the Mona Lisa goes up in flames.
It is destroyed in a fire caused by Clear. And they all go and sit outside on the steps, and she's like, well, I might not have been able to prove that you killed my sister, but I've killed your technology, your dangerous fuel technology, and your, whole business empire in one go.
Yes, he realizes that his reputation is completely ruined by this. This is something that not even money could really get him out of, because literally the only story is that the fuel that he invented was responsible for destroying the world's most priceless piece of art. Which is about as satisfying a comeuppance you could probably get for someone of that nature, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't happy at first that she's not really getting revenge for her sister's, justice for her sister's death, rather.
Right.
But then it turns out she does. So it's a really satisfying ending, and all of his former friends and associates just decide to turn on him at this point because he's no longer got anything to offer them.
Right.
Yeah.
As soon as they, as soon as they don't get anything out of the relationship, it's kind of implied earlier in the film that they don't really like him. He just kind of edges into their friend group. And because he then got successful, they agree to hang out with him, basically. And as soon as him being successful is off the cards, as soon as them being associated with him would actually be damaging more than anything else to their reputations, they no longer have any reason to back him up or defend him, and he realizes that he is truly alone.
And we see the police arriving on police boats.
Yes.
And I think the movie ends there.
Yeah, of course, Blanc is kind of watching this whole scene from a distance with a character that we haven't mentioned yet, I don't think.
Oh, no, we he is sitting there with Daryl, who is just on the island because he's going through some stuff. So Daryl is always there in the background, but he's not involved in the weekend's events at all.
Occasionally just says, "Ignore me, I'm not here," and stuff like that, which is quite a funny bit. I wondered whether he might have something more to do with it in the end, but no, he's just there.
Of course, he's played by Noah Segan, who played Trooper Wagner in Knives Out.
Yes.
And who Rian Johnson tries to include in all of his movies.
I suppose that's a way to get him in. So yeah, that's the film. I really enjoyed it. I think that it's maybe in a way that a lot of sequels are. Maybe it's a little bit of a messier film than the first one. Maybe some of the character work isn't as just top notch as the first film, but a lot of it is really good as well. The character work, but I think that it's in the same conversation as that film, and it can stand very proudly, but beside it, I think. So I can really strongly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent sequel, and I think I said it last time that if Knives Out didn't exist, this film would just be knocking this out of the park.
Right.
It's just the fact that Knives Out exists and is such a fantastic movie that there's even anything sort of negative you can say about this. Really, it is a great movie, very well done. Cinematography is fantastic as well. They've got some amazing shots. The Glass Onion is really nice. I'm looking forward to finding out whether they built some of that or whether it's all just CG. I think it might just all be CG.
Yeah. It's hard to say nowadays. But yeah, definitely some sort of mixture.
Yeah, so you should definitely watch it, and you have done already by listening to this podcast, right?
Right. Yeah, you haven't just spoiled the whole film by listening to this. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Hope you haven't.
No, if you have, you've got to go and watch it on Netflix right now, 3 times as penance.
Yeah, should we have maybe just cap this off with a good old 30-minute conversation about how much we like how Netflix has handled the release of this film again?
It's real great. I love that I wanted to see it again and can't for 10 more days. How it made half the money of the predecessor in cinemas because it was released in a third as many cinemas.
Yeah. Let's not revisit that. Really, we had if you happen to not have listened to the spoiler-free podcast because you thought you'd just wait for the spoiler one because you know what happens in the film, then we have a lengthy discussion at the beginning of our recap. In that one, where we talk about how our problems with the way that this was released.
I mean, we were both huge fans of Knives Out, and we almost didn't get to see it. So,
yes, it was looking very much like I might have to set up a projector in my living room at some point, so that we could have some sort of cinematic experience.
But no, I loved it, and I eagerly look forward to more of them because, as we discussed, I think it's either a 3 or 4 film deal. I think it might be 3 now that I've said it out loud.
I think it is 3. Yeah. But well, I suppose before we call this whole thing a day, I don't want to go into what it is, but I think we have some sort of idea about what we're going to do next, right?
Ooh, are we giving away a little reward of for the long time listener?
Do we say what it is, or do we hold it back? Because I feel like if we say what it is, we have to go into why, because it's a bit of a weird decision in some ways.
I'll leave that in your greasy hands, Peter. This is on you.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that we don't know when, because I think we would both agree that the early parts of next year are pretty stacked up for us as far as activities go.
Yeah, very busy.
We might not have a lot of time to record podcasts in the early parts of next year, so it might be that they're probably going to be a bit of a break now.
Yeah.
Before we start in on our next project.
But we will return.
And we can always edit this out if we decide against it.
I mean, I'm going to be editing this in like 15 minutes, so it's your...
Well, we thought we might do Back to the Future Part 2.
Dun, dun, dun. Will this be copyright struck on YouTube if I sing? I better stop.
Yeah, stop. Yep. So that might strike you as a bit of a weird decision, because
why didn't they do part 1? Huh?
Yeah, why didn't we do part 1? And I think the reason that we came to for skipping straight to part 2 is, first of all, because there's loads of material on part 1 out there. If you want to find out facts and interesting discussion of the first film, there are places that you can go. There's loads of material. I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's enjoyable having these conversations, and apparently people enjoy listening to these us talk about them as well.
It's nice.
It's very nice. We appreciate that. But maybe we don't have a lot to add to it. Is one reason, whereas there's a bit less discussion around of the second film, just because it's a bit less iconic. I think they're all pretty iconic at this point, but it's a little bit less iconic. The first one really stands well on its own, whereas the second one is very much a middle thing, you know. But what we realized when we were talking about whether we wanted to do a Back to the Future film is that Back to the Future 2 is such a big old glorious mess that there's just loads to talk about.
Yeah.
And it might just be more fun to have a conversation about all the little bits of that film that are so weird and interesting, and we kind of sold ourselves on the idea of skipping straight to the second part.
I mean, don't get us wrong. Back to the Future, the first movie, is absolutely iconic, and it sets up the whole thing so well. It's sort of like this fantastic sort of ticking clock of all these little pieces moving into place at the right time.
Yeah.
But the sequel just it does it again and better. I think I preferred the sequel as a kid. So
I also did, and the way I've always said it is that I don't know whether Back to the Future 2 is a better film than Back to the Future 1 when you look at how tightly it's scripted and things like that, and when you look at the craft of it, maybe it's not as good as a film, but it is nevertheless my favorite of them. It's the most Back to the Future that Back to the Future gets, and I have a real soft spot for it, even the bits that hold up not so well or weirdly after we've passed the year 2015, you know. And so I just really look forward to getting into conversations about all of the kind of weird shit that's in that film. And so Back to the Future 2 seems to be where we're going.
Yeah. Peter, I've just had an idea. Can we pretend that this is season 6 and we did Back to the Future as season 5, and and we only reveal, or like we just keep the joke going for the whole season until the last episode?
as part of a hostile listening environment.
Yeah, HLE, yeah.
Yeah.
I just really want people going,
Yeah.
God, where's season 5?
It's a pretty interesting idea. I'll give you that. If you listen to this, you're in on our little secret.
Yeah. You gained a little treat because you went and watched Glass Onion like we told you to.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. Like you say, it will probably be a couple of months at least before we can really dig into it. I find the idea of this one interesting actually because it's going to be one of the few movies I think where you've seen it a lot. Compared to our normal format, which is I speak of a film that I've seen 100,000 times and I forced you to watch thrice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've seen Knives Out quite a lot of times as well, but this is a film that has been one of my favorite films, if not my favorite film, since I was a very young child. So.
Lifelong favorite. You might have seen it 5 times, perhaps.
Maybe. maybe I even have to start counting on my toes as well.
Do you only have 5 fingers?
It's complicated.
Were your hands generated by one of those AI? By Midjourney?
All right.
Okay, listeners, thank you for joining us on this weird little digression that was just sort of so timely we couldn't resist it. And we hope you enjoyed watching it, and you hope you enjoyed listening to us talk about it. Pause while I alt-tab to the outro text. Who's infected? No. If you have any questions or comments about any of this stuff, you can email us at podcast@8minutemovies.co.uk. If you like the show, you should tell a friend or leave a comment if you can, wherever you listen to it, because that helps the hashtag engagement. And the sooner this podcast becomes huge, the sooner I can retire on that glorious Audible money that we're definitely not getting now. And you can follow us on the Twitters if that still exists at the time of broadcast. Yes. I'm Kieran J. Walsh. Peter is Kestrel Pie. That's Kestrel like the burb and Pie like the irrational number.
There you go.
It's like, what is it? I was going to say like the fruit, but then I realized that pie isn't a fruit, which sort of derailed me.
It's not like the food either.
Well, I mean, it is like the food if you subtract another irrational number, the natural logarithm. I'm not sure if E is an irrational number. Listeners, write in if it is or isn't. I can't be bothered Googling it.
I mean, I already thought that I was overcomplicating the explanation.
I've made it much worse. Yeah. Also, we have a Twitter for the show, which will let you know when new episodes are released. It's called 8 Minute Movies, 8 with a number. I think. Hang on.
Let's go with that.
Hang on, I'll check. Yes, 8 Minute Movies, 8 to the number, then Minute Movies. Yes, a Twitter account. Hashtag consummate professionalism.
Hurrah!
All right, thank you for listening, and good evening to you all. Oh, it might not be evening. Goodbye.
Bye.